My entitled sister demands that we take her 5-year-old daughter to Disney World. All names in this story are different from what their actual names are. Some background: I'm the youngest of 8 siblings, and my sister, who we'll call Carol, is always super entitled whenever it came to her having authority over stuff. She was my boss at a gas station at one point and demanded that I do everything right the first time, even if it was something I had never been trained how to do. She would also hold me to a stricter standard of work while her friend was allowed to basically do whatever she wanted. Carol begged me to come into work one night while our state was suffering from a blizzard, and even had my dad drive me in since my car couldn't handle the snow. I did what I could to shovel the walkways and keep the pumps cleared, especially after the mechanic our gas station shared a building with came by and helped to plow the lot so the customers could actually come in and pump gas. And yet, instead of thanking me for risking not just my life, but my father's, in order to prevent her from having to come in, Carol complained that I didn't go out and do some of the cleaning I was supposed to do, washing the pumps, mopping the bathroom, wiping the windows, etc. I wouldn't have such a problem with this normally, until one of my co-workers informed me that another co-worker was not only frequently calling out at the last minute before her shift with no repercussions, but that she would often spend most of her shift in the back, hanging out and talking with Carol, leaving me and my co-workers to end up having to pick up her slack. I ended up quitting the job a few months later when she got mad at me for insisting to a customer that he can't leave his fuel pump unoccupied, which she told me to do with every customer, no matter how belligerent they get, because, apparently, the guy was the former owner of the building. But that's just her as a boss, and I'm sure you guys want to hear how bad she is as a parent. My sister has 2 kids, a son who is now in his 20s, Andy, and a daughter who's going to be turning 5 very soon, Lucy. My nephew didn't have the best upbringing, as his parents didn't actually get married until he was older. He was very bratty as a child and likely would have stayed like that if my parents hadn't set him right. At first, we assumed that this was because his grandparents on his father's side were teaching him to do bad things, but now it seems like it was a mixture of that and how Carol raised him. Carol didn't really spend most of her time paying attention to Andy and what he did, as she typically expected me to be the one doing so. I'm relatively close in age to my nephew because of the age gap between me and most of my siblings. For years, Carol tried doing everything she could to have a daughter, and while I was sad that she never got the chance to for a while, she and her husband also don't make that much money, as evident by the fact that they've always been living in apartment complexes with roommates. Well, back in the blissful, pre-pandemic year of 2017, she finally got her wish and gave birth to Lucy. Right away, her entitlement began to really show off, as she would constantly brag about how great her daughter was while pretty much ignoring when she was doing something that would get in trouble. In some cases, she outright encouraged it. There was a holiday gathering for the family in 2019 where Lucy was yelling and screaming and refusing to eat anything she was given, yet Carol never did anything about it. When my mom told Carol that she needed to actually parent her child, Carol told Lucy to go and slap my mom, which she did. My parents left the party after that. We didn't see her much during the pandemic until the summer of 2021, when she decided to stop by for a visit. By now, the vaccines had been available for everyone over the age of 13. Andy didn't want to get vaccinated, and that was because apparently his father, Mike, also wasn't vaccinated. By now, Andy was an adult, so he didn't really get dragged along to do things with his parents. Carol, Mike, and Lucy all stopped by. Carol insisted that she was vaccinated, so she didn't wear a mask. However, Lucy also didn't wear a mask, and she wasn't vaccinated. Mike wore a mask at least and stayed more than 6 feet apart from everyone else. My parents and I were both vaccinated, however. When they stopped by, I was still asleep, and when I came out of my room to see what the commotion was about, I saw that we had visitors. Lucy was wandering around in the kitchen, disturbing our dog Princess and making her nervous. When my sister saw me, she demanded that I hug her, as if I was still a child. Come to find out, Carol had lied about being vaccinated, and she could have exposed me and my parents to COVID, including the Delta variant, due to the number of people she frequently would meet up with. This all came to a head yesterday, when Carol decided to drop by to pick up a birthday card for Lucy that my parents got her. Now, my mother isn't a very social person, and Carol is actually her stepdaughter, my dad's daughter from a previous marriage. My mom doesn't like being in crowds, around strangers/people she barely knows, and especially being anywhere close to my dad's family, as they had always hated her. Lucy has her 5th birthday coming up, so they decided to get her a card, along with a gift card to Amazon. My parents used to give actual money as a gift, as they didn't always know what the grandkids liked and didn't like, but they stopped that after Carol started taking Andy's money away from him to pay her in-laws whenever they would come around asking for money. To be fair, some other nieces and nephews were responsible with their money and saved it up, but since my parents wanted them to get something for birthdays and holidays, they decided to give each of them Amazon gift cards from now on. Carol and Lucy come over, and immediately all hell begins breaking loose. Princess is going crazy because she knows we don't want her being there for long. My parents are wearing masks since they still don't know what the vaccination status is of either my sister or my niece. When Lucy got her card, she seemed upset that the gift wasn't actual money. They also noticed that Lucy's vocabulary was very limited, especially for a 5-year-old, and, being medically trained in the military, they figured that maybe Lucy has autism. They suggested to Carol that she get tested for that, as it would really help Carol know how to raise her child if that was the case, as well as the fact that it might help her when she starts actual school, since she was struggling even in pre-K. Carol insisted that she didn't need to do such a thing. Then, when they gave her an ice cream bar, since Lucy kept saying how she wanted ice cream, she kept taking off the chocolate parts and trying to feed it to Princess. When my dad tried to talk to Carol to try and convince her to get Lucy tested, Lucy started smacking my mother in her chest repeatedly. Then my sister decided to drop a bomb on my parents. You know, since you took Andy to Disney World, you should take Lucy there as well. For the record, my parents took Andy to Disney World before Lucy was born as a birthday gift because Mike's parents kept promising for years that they would take him, but never would. Lucy hadn't done anything to deserve being taken to Disney World, and, on top of that, my parents didn't have anywhere close to that amount of money. Not to mention that we're still dealing with a pandemic, and they're both high risk for catching COVID due to their age and medical conditions. They told her they weren't going to go to Disney World, and she left in a huff. My parents are super pissed about how Carol demanded this, and they're worried that Lucy's entitlement and autism, combined with Carol's parenting, will lead Lucy to either be a bully once school starts or lead to her being a major target for bullying. Entitled parents stole my Switch and held it hostage because I wasn't visiting anymore. I'm 20 male and moved out of my parents' house at 18 because I really can't stand them. And it's for all of the kinds of reasons you can guess. They were jerks, favored my younger siblings, used me as free child care, told me what's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine, and all that BS. When I left, my dad told me not to let the door hit me on my way out and don't come back. I got the smallest and cheapest apartment I could find and have worked the same full-time job for 2 years. My parents didn't even hold out a month before calling me and begging me to come back home. Because without me someone else had to watch my siblings. I refused because now I finally had time for myself. My dad eventually called me and actually demanded I move back home and pay them rent instead because family is more important than my personal independence. I said back to him that my life is important too. And for once I'm getting to live for myself. So he basically said, well then see how long you can last without us. And we didn't talk for months. I don't know what he was hoping for. I managed well enough by myself. My family seemed to slowly accept that I wasn't going to come crawling back, and over time we seemed to mend things. I could tell they were having a hard time dealing with the fact things were on my terms and not theirs. They begged me to watch my youngest siblings from time to time, even though the two that are closest to me in age are in their mid-teens now. But my parents don't want to put babysitting on them any more than they have to. Which is hypocritical of them since they tried to put it on me as much as possible. And yes, I have called them out on that. They responded with gaslighting and more months of silence yet again. And again they were the ones to come crawling back to me for help. Not long ago I bought myself a used Nintendo Switch. Though could only afford one game for it at the moment. Which is Mario Kart. I got it bundled with the console for a good deal. My mom came by on a Saturday and asked me to watch my two youngest siblings for a while. She basically pushed them in the door at me and ran. And I was stuck with these two rowdy kids all day in my tiny apartment. My mom didn't come back until after 9 p.m. And that was because I called her and made her come get the kids. And she really didn't like that I cut her fun time short. I said that unless she wanted to pay me, I wasn't going to be watching my siblings all day anymore. And next time I won't even open the door, and I'll call the cops if she just leaves them outside. The next morning I realized I couldn't find my Switch anywhere. So I called my parents. And like I thought, one of my siblings took it. I said I was coming over to get it right away. But my mom said it could wait because my youngest sibling was gaming on it. And she didn't have the heart to take it away. I said it was taken without my permission. And I will be taking it back. I got on my bike and rode there ASAP. And when I arrived, my sibling was crying because the Switch's battery had gone dead and they didn't have the charger. I told them to give it back. But my dad took it and said I can have it back when I agree to start helping out with my siblings more. I told him if that's how he wanted to play this, I'd get police involved. And no, I was not bluffing. He dug his heels in and insisted I wouldn't do it. Until I pulled my phone out and started dialing. My mom yelled wait. And hurriedly took my Switch back from my dad. He called her a traitor and demanded she return it to him instead of me. But she said it wasn't worth having police called on them. Before leaving I told them if this ever happens again, I'd be calling the police first. And if they want a Switch for my siblings so bad, they can get their own. My dad yelled that I can't disrespect him like that. And I countered that even though I'm an adult, he's not bothered to ever show an ounce of respect to me. And I'd had enough. Then I walked out with him yelling at me to come back and face him. Right now it's back to silence from them. My mom texted me once begging me to still watch my siblings. I said that if she wanted me to babysit so bad, she could pay me. And I'd only take the money in advance. Because I'm not doing it for free anymore. Especially after they stole from me and tried to keep from returning my property. They don't own me, I'm an adult with my own place and my own life. And they can either get used to it or get lost. It's been over a week since the text convo, and none of them have as of yet talked to me again. Which is fine. They can deal with their own messes.